It is now time to experience the buzz, a podcast that takes an inside look at amazing people doing amazing things. Get ready for some great conversation that will be fascinating, educational, and inspiring. We will also leave room to help small businesses in a big way. Now, here's your host, entrepreneur Steve Buzzard.
Hello, everyone, and welcome in. It is another edition of Experience the Buzz. We are so glad you could join us. In fact, I want to say thank you. Thank you personally to those of you that have made the decision to stop by, whether you are checking us out on the podcast scene. It could be Apple, Spotify, Google, or any of the other platforms that we are on. Or you like the video version, right? Some of us like the video version on YouTube. Big thank you to my producer, Michael Kenobi, who puts this all together. But the thank you part is very, very important to me because as I get back into doing this podcast, I realize this is what it's all about, right? Serving you to be able to give you stories that you can tap into that are going to inspire you. And it could be one little thing that happens, or it could be a whole conversation, or it could be the person that I am actually talking to. But whatever it is, I wanted to serve you in a way that is positive and really makes you look around and say, wow, being an entrepreneur is great. And even if you're not an entrepreneur, this is a good way to kind of get an insight to maybe how entrepreneurs think and what they do. And I am so excited for today's episode. Christian Dyer is going to be with us. A young kid that I knew as a little one, growing up in Carmichael, California, to this rugby player. That's right, he plays in Major League Rugby. He is currently playing with the Houston Sabercats. And here's the deal. He's played for Team USA as a teenager. He was a standout at Jesuit. He was a standout at Cal. Played for Team USA just recently in the Olympics. I mean, his resume is insane. What I love about Christian is the fact that he has taken the world of rugby and he has really expanded himself as an entrepreneur. He has his own podcast called The Chase, right? You should check that out. Of course, we'll drop that in the notes. But it's all the other things, too, that he has done. He is creating systems for himself that really go around this world that is his right now, and that's the world of rugby. So our conversation, I'm guaranteeing you, it's a fun one. You're going to love it. And so let's not waste any more time. Let's get to it. Enjoy the conversation. All right, here we go, everybody. It is Experience the Buzz. It is episode number 136. We're back at it after a little hiatus, and I am very excited. Christian Dyer is with us. Christian, thank you for being with me today.
What is going on, Mr. Buzzard? I'm stoked to be here. I'm grateful to be here. I only saw you a few weeks ago at my sister's wedding, but nonetheless, this is like a blast back to my childhood with all the memories I have with you growing up playing basketball.
This is a very unique situation, folks, because yes, let's go ahead and start there. Sister Maddie got married a few weeks ago. I was the DJ. Christian was there. The Dyer family was there. The whole Sierra Oaks crew was there, and we had so much fun. So it was a great way to reconnect. And as we were talking, I'm like, dude, I have got to get you on the podcast, and I want to thank you for making that happen.
Oh, I'm happy to be here. It's my pleasure.
So when you introduce yourself, how would you introduce yourself to people? I'm Christian Dyer, and I'm fill in the blank.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of just leave out their whole rugby part until somebody asks me what I do for a living. I just say, yeah, I'm Christian Dyer, and I'm living life.
Yeah, and you are living life. And so you do mention rugby, and I do want to start there. I think it's very important for the listener because rugby, while it's definitely very popular, I think a lot of people don't know what the sport is in its entirety. I know what it is, but there's terms that are used. So if you were to break down for just the person who had no idea what rugby is about, could you explain the sport to the people?
Yeah, obviously rugby in America is still in its infancy stages. But if you go over to Europe or the Southern Hemisphere and Australia, New Zealand, South Africa, that's one of their main sports. But here in America, it's in its growing stages, which is fantastic to be a part of. And the Rugby World Cup's going to be here in 2031, which is just huge for our nation and our rugby union. But to sum up what the sport is if you were to put football and soccer and maybe even a little bit of basketball in there together and they had a baby, that's rugby. It's a very physical sport. It's 2 40-minute halves, 15 versus 15. It's nonstop, kind of like soccer, where there is some stoppage for a penalty, or if the ball goes out of bounds, there's a small stoppage, but the game is very free flowing. And I think one of the coolest parts about the sport of rugby is there's a position for all shapes and sizes, and everybody on the field has the opportunity to catch the ball, pass the ball, score the ball, kick the ball, even though there's probably some guys on the field that should probably never kick the ball. And it's so unique in the fact that you don't have to be the biggest, fastest, or strongest person in the States to play rugby and be good at it. And I think there's some sports in America where if you don't really pass that eye test, where, you know, college football programs are looking for the biggest, strongest, fastest high school players, they're probably not going to recruit you. I mean, I was in high school and I didn't really even hit puberty till I was senior year. But just my game IQ and my skill set leveled allowed me to go play for the national team at a young level, and allowed me to travel the world and play this game that I love. And that's something that I think we're so fortunate to have in this sport of rugby.
And there's also different versions, right? There's the 15s and there's 7s, I believe.
Yeah, exactly. 7s is tournament style, so it's 14-minute games, 2 7-minute halves, 7 versus 7, but they're playing on the same size rugby field, so they're covering tons of meters. It's very, very fast-paced. They'll play 3 games in a day, and 2 games on, two days on the weekend, and that's the version that's in the Olympics, which will be here coming up in July in the 2024 Olympics.
And what is the most common knowledge, like the common terms? Like if you were to pick the top 5 terms of rugby, what would they be?
I'd say probably a scrum, because everybody wants to know why there's 8 guys versus 8 guys just pushing each other, and it's just pure brute force at the end of the day. So scrum is definitely one of those. If you were to score, it's called a try. The conversion after is similar to our conversion in football, right? You kick the ball after you score a try. There's a lot of tackling involved in the game of rugby. And then every time somebody goes down, which happens, 150, maybe 200 times a game, there's this thing called a ruck, where you have to go secure the ball so the opposition can't steal it from you on the ground.
Got it. And then also the pitch, right? That's a big one too.
We call the rugby field the pitch, or a rugby pit.
Got it. Okay, so there you have it. I wanted to start out that way because I think that will kind of set the foundation for what this conversation is going to be all about.
Yep.
I'm very proud of this guy right here. I'm just going to tell you right now. This is Christian Dyer, who, he talked about, I've known him since he was a kid. And when he was a kid, he played all the sports and everything, and went through my program, which was a basketball program. And, was around great kids and ended up going to Jesuit. And I think there was a point where, and you tell me if this is true, Christian, I see this, especially at Jesuit High School, we talk about plan Bs, right? You have your main sports. And when I say main sports out here on the West Coast, in the fall, it's football. In the winter, it's basketball. In the spring, it's baseball. Okay? So that landscape has changed because you have other sports, swimming, water polo, you name it, rugby being another one. But at Jesuit in particular, what I started finding is that individuals like yourself, that maybe where the big 3 didn't work out, they would go to rugby. And in a way you say, wow, how do they know or want to play rugby? But Jesuit High School did such a good job of being able to form a first-class program that the kids that took to it, like yourself, ended up not only loving it, but ended up doing very well at it. And that is your story. Take me back to that moment. Was it a plan B for you when you were in high school?
Sure. So to put it into context, like you mentioned, I played every single sport growing up: basketball, football, baseball, soccer. Football was always the one that stuck, and the one that I thrived in the environment, and I absolutely loved it. Tried basketball. I think my energy and just, aggressiveness on the court kind of got me, to a decent level, but I never excelled at basketball. Soccer, I found it boring. Baseball, I found it even more boring. I tried lacrosse one year. I liked the fact that you could hit people, and it was somewhat of a contact sport, but the whole stick in my hand and throwing the ball through this stick and this net, it didn't stick for me. And my dad was like, dude, you got to pick a sport outside of football and stick with it. And somehow, I don't know, family friend introduced Ken, my father, to the sport of rugby, and he was like, Christian, just go check it out. And that was when I was in 7th grade down in Lamb Park. And I loved it, but let's be real, I was really bad at it to begin with. There's so many rules and nuances to the game of rugby that I never understood until obviously I went to Jesuit. Yep. And the origin story of rugby is based in London, in the United Kingdom, and it was always kind of this posh upper echelon sport where all the private boys in the UK would play rugby and all the kids that went to the public schools played soccer. And Jesuit, being a private boys school, I guess just carried on that tradition, and they started up in the late 1990s and just started to build this program, and they did tremendously well. Obviously, Jesuit brings in some quality class athletes, and they brought in some high-level coaches, which is often pretty unfamiliar and uncharted waters here in America with the rugby coaches. I think a lot of them think they know what they're doing, but in reality, they really don't. In Jesuit, we were just fortunate enough to have a lot of guys at the inception of the rugby program to build this culture, build this high-performance environment, and have the schools support the system in the sport. And when I went to Jesuit, I knew immediately I wanted to be part of this. Some of the guys that went through the program, Blaine Scully, Jesuit guy, Cal guy, captain of the USA Eagles. Fast forward a few years, you had guys like Casey Riley, Matt Turnan, Matt Coyle, Austin Gates. All of these guys that I looked up to would play football, but they would also play rugby in the spring months. And I was like, okay, I want to do that. And I was just so fortunate to be in that environment with some great people around me. And the coolest thing about playing rugby at Jesuit was the culture and the vibe associated with the sport was just unparalleled. I mean, no other sport could compare to it. You know what football's like. It can get brutal at times, which is one of the greatest gifts that football gives young kids, is just that structure and that discipline and that accountability. But with rugby, we had all that with a vibe and with this energy and with this culture that everybody was welcome to come play the sport. And I even had best friends in high school who should never be on a rugby field, or who should probably never be on any athletic field playing the game. You know, we had an A side, a B side, and a C side. And it was just such this cool culture and environment that I just fell in love with. And I knew from that moment, this was something that I want to stick to. I was undersized through my entire high school career. I remember going in, I was 5'3", 155 pounds, but I had this heart of a lion and just this demeanor about myself that I wasn't going to allow the size of me to dictate how I played or what I put out on the field. And I just think it was a combination of everything that I just mentioned that really allowed me to fall in love with the game and then just develop. And when I finally started to become good at the sport and finally started to understand all the nuances to the game and start understanding different components on a mental level associated with rugby, that's when I really started to accelerate.
Christian Dyer is who we're talking to right now. And this bears repeating. I said this in the intro before we started the conversation, but you are looking at a guy, you're listening to a guy right now who in the rugby world right now currently plays for the Houston Sabercats. That's Major League Rugby. So like Major League Baseball, it's an American professional league right here in America. He's based in Houston. He's played for Team USA. After Jesuit went to Cal, he was an All-American. So he's seen all the facets of what this game has had to bring. And by the way, go ahead and do this now if you want to. You can even pause this interview and just go Google Christian Dyer rugby highlights, and you'll see what I mean. Christian, watching you play, it's amazing. Like, you are fast as a cheetah, my friend. My goodness. Now, listen, you always did have speed, but I like the fact that you talked about that you were the guy that was maybe not looked at amongst other friends that you had that were doing all these sports, but yet you found something special. So as you're at Jesuit, was there that point, that kind of point like going, okay, this is going to go beyond Jesuit. I really have a love for this game. And obviously, I just gave it away. You went to Cal. But take me through what that journey was like from high school, then deciding college is next.
Yeah, the real pivotal moment was when I went over to London to represent the U16's national team. You know, we were the only American team there. We were the only country represented there that was outside the UK. Or the only team outside of the UK. And I think getting exposed to the realities of rugby over in Europe, that's what changed my entire mindset going forward with the sport of rugby. I started to realize it's a global sport. I could represent the USA in the sport of rugby. You can make a career out of this sport. And there's a chance to go play in World Cups or go play in the Olympics. And I just think that right there was probably the biggest privilege that I could have ever received, was understanding that I could play for my country. And from there, that's when I went all in.
Yeah, and I know maybe this should come later in the conversation, but since you've hit it, we might as well address it now. Playing for your country, right? Playing for Jesuit high school is one thing.
Yep.
Playing for Cal, a very storied franchise, that does so good. To play for the Houston Sabercats, yes, but playing for Team USA, whether you're U16s or now as an adult, can you explain that to us?
It's different. It's really hard to put words and do it justice, but it's a feeling like no other. When I'm in another country, sometimes playing in front of 50, 60, 70,000 people, and I'm wearing our USA colors, the red, white, and blue, singing the national anthem, and every other fan there, they're respective during the national anthem, but when the game's going, it's all boos, it's all hate, and it's one of the coolest things I've ever experienced. But at the international level, it's the best of the best from every country. Everybody's big, fast, and strong. Everybody has the core basic skills of rugby down to a T. And everything's heightened. The collisions are bigger. The speed of the game is faster. The kicking game is on another level. I've got to cover the field so much faster and with so many more meters on my legs than playing professionally or playing at Cal. So everything's just heightened. But it's a rush. I mean, it's an adrenaline feeling like no other. And I probably have a screw or two loose on my head, but I'm obsessed with it.
Hey, you're still running. And by the way, it's funny. We haven't even addressed the elephant in the room. We're just going to do it right now. Yep. If you're on the YouTube version, you'll notice that Christian, he's a very good-looking guy. But something happened this past weekend in his match. I'll let you to describe.
Yeah, I mean, you could probably see it right now. Another broken nose. This is the third one. 6 stitches this time. I should know by now not to tackle people with my face, but the guy moved to the left when I thought he was going to move to the right, and I just anticipated it wrong, and I tackled him with my nose. And yeah, next thing you know, I'm under the stadium getting stitches and getting a new jersey and coming right back in the game. But that's really the nature of the sport. It happens quite often.
Yes. And like you said, he's had numerous amounts of injuries. In fact, we're going to talk about one a little bit later that led to him running a marathon. How about that? That was pretty recent, too, so that was pretty cool. But getting back to kind of this timeline, you go to Cal. Talk to me about the Cal experience, right? Because you had Jesuit, you had the foundation, great program. Now you're really stepping into a program at the college level.
Sure. It was definitely an adjustment period because coming from Jesuit, I was the big fish in the small pond. I was better than the majority of players at the high school level. I kind of had an ego to my game and just this sense of, yeah, I'm pretty good and I should probably come into Cal and play on the A side and start every game and I'm going to do that for 4 years. But at the end of the day, it was an amazing reality check for me to realize, hey, I'm not where I need to be, and there's still so much growth left in my game, and there's also so much growth left in my abilities to lead a team and just my maturity level. There was so much more to it. So it was a humbling experience, but it was also the coolest thing ever that I was in this high-performance environment, and rugby at Cal is a varsity sport, so it's fully funded and sponsored by the university. You have access to tutors and the weight room that the football team uses and meals and everything. And I think just that environment, this high performance environment with world-class coaches and world-class trainers and strength and conditioning staff, that's where a big passion of mine is health and fitness and human performance. And that's really where it originated. But I think it's the structure and the environment that I needed to thrive and obviously get to where I was to where I'm at today is just being around really, really world-class people.
Yeah, and during that time, now I meant to ask you this before we came on. I think of Robert Paler, right?
Yeah.
And that situation. I can't remember. Did you play with him?
At Jesuit or at Cal?
Oh, at Cal.
Yeah, so he was a sophomore when I was a freshman in that national championship game. I wasn't playing in that game, but that's when Robert got injured.
Yeah, and I was able to see Robert. He's a motivational speaker.
Yeah.
Just killing it on the circuit, and his story is so incredible to tell. But I know Cal, that was like such a big thing when that happened, and yes, he too was a Jesuit grad. So, you're going through the Cal experience. So what's kind of hitting me as I'm thinking, Christian, is like this young kid, right, that really just had great energy and everything, but you develop this confidence. And it's like this confidence that I can't really put my finger on, but I know you can describe for us. Because you found something at Jesuit in rugby, and now you are going to Cal. And the fact that you recognize the fact that, there's still work to do, that speaks volumes too. So talk to me about that growth that not only had to take place physically, but also mentally.
Sure. I always say confidence comes from doing the things that you say you're going to do. And that's something I learned at Cal, was doing the little things, the rehab, eating well, sleeping well, doing all your prehab, your rehab. Because I used to think that I needed to turn it on when I put the boots on and when I got on the rugby field, and that was it. And then everything else outside of life had no correlation to my performance on the field. And when I was at Cal, Tom Billups, who's the assistant coach and the strength and conditioning coach, who's probably been one of the biggest mentors in my life, started to change my perspective on this whole thing. And everything now is just a lifestyle. So what I do on the field is exactly how I approach my life off the field. And so it's the little things at the end of the day. I've mentioned it's what I'm putting into my body. It's how I'm treating people. It's how I'm growing my mind. It's creating my own podcast, being on podcasts, reading books, listening to books, watching YouTube videos of the best and the greatest in sports and business and whatever career it is, and just absorbing as much knowledge as I possibly can be. And I really, really realized if I want to be the best rugby player I can be, I got to be the best Christian Dyer that I can be in life. And I think it comes down to trying to be the best son to mom and dad, Ken and Nancy, or best brother and sister, brother to Maddie and Jack. And I want to be the best teammate. And so the quote that I always tell myself and remind myself on a weekly basis is, be the player that everyone wants to play for or play with. And I think that's one of the greatest honors you can have, is have teammates on your team or, opponents elsewhere in the country or in other countries want to play with me one day. And that's how I'm approaching everything. And I think confidence is just a byproduct of doing all those little things. Because you can't fake it. Mm-mm. There's a lot of people that come off, maybe they're arrogant or they talk a big game, but when you're on the rugby field, your performance is going to speak for itself, and your results are going to give you confidence, and they're going to give you clout. People are going to buy into that. And so in a nutshell, everything I do is now just a lifestyle.
See, and that snippet right there is the reason why I'm so proud of you, Christian. I mean, that right there speaks volumes. And so that's why I'm so excited for you. Having seen you come through the basketball program, I always tell people that basketball is a vehicle. The thing I care about is who you are as a human being when you walk out the door, and you've done that. So as we end this first segment, and we kind of put to bed the high school and college career, can you hit some highlights? Obviously, you won some national championships, but are there highlights within there and maybe things you learned, which you've kind of already touched upon within your high school and college career?
Yeah, I think one of the big moments in my life that changed a lot of things was tearing my ACL. And that was right before getting selected for the Pan American Games. I made the team. We were going to go back to the Olympic Training Center for 2 weeks to train before going to Lima, Peru to represent Team USA. And I went up on a kickoff and boom, came down, tore my ACL, and just everything ended. And at that point, rugby was my identity. And my happiness off the field was a direct byproduct of how I was doing on the field. And so if I wasn't playing well that week following, I'm probably in a bad mood, for lack of better words. Or,
wow. So look at that, folks. He didn't even mention the national championships or scoring. It's an injury. And I think that's going to tell you what we know about Christian, is that the adversity in his life is what makes him stronger. And that, I'm sorry that sounds cliche, but that's so very true. So we're going to dip away for our first break, hear from our sponsors here on the program. And when we come back, chapter 2 of this great conversation, what happens after college, right? And then there's other things to scratch the surface on, which is the fact that Christian mentioned that he is the host of his own podcast. I want to talk about that too. That's called The Chase. He does a very good job on that. And of course, other great things within this conversation. Don't go anywhere. We'll be back right after this. So what'd you think there, huh? So far, so good. Great conversation with Christian Dyer, just 26 years of age. Again, I've known him since he was a kid. Look what he's doing now. And what if I told you the conversation following this little break right now is even better? It just gets better. And so I want to take this opportunity. On this program, we are very fortunate to have a couple of sponsors. I want to tell you about my first one, Pit Boss Jerky. Joe Green, congratulations on doing such a great job. Big step for him is that they are now on the internet. That's right. We had talked for months upon months about getting Pit Boss Jerky on the internet. It has finally happened. pitbossjerky.com. There is a flavor, one of 13, I believe now, because it's kind of gone back and forth. This guy's the mad scientist of beef jerky, and it truly is the best beef jerky I have ever had. Better than the brands that we kind of all know, and I'm not even going to say them because it's not worth it. PBJ, and I'm not talking about peanut butter and jelly. I'm talking about Pit Boss Jerky. We've got a flavor called the Buzz Experience. That's right. You can check it out. Go on the website. You can order that way. If you are local, you can go to Amy Hardware, or you can go to Knee Deep Brewery if you're up in Auburn. It's there. You can buy it right there. Okay, so thank you, Joe Green. We're going to have a follow-up conversation with him. He has been a guest on the program. Also want to thank MIKIMOS Barbecue and Catering. That is run by my producer. That's right, Michael Kenobi and his father-in-law, and they are really picking up on the business. You can check them out on Instagram, MIKIMOS_barbecue. Right? Is it spelled out? Oh, man, I forget. You know what? I've dropped it down in the notes. Just go ahead and check that out and check him out. And if you have an event coming up and you love barbecue, well, I guess that would be a natural thing just to kind of bring it together. Now, if you are out there and you're a local business and you would like to be highlighted on a program like this, you know what? Don't DM me. Just go ahead and text me at 916-947-7464. I think that is the best way to get a hold of me, and I will make sure that we can find a place for you. It's a great place to come in, highlight your business. We'll also do a podcast episode with you, and that way you can tell your story, just like our other guests have done on the program. Okay, there you have it. Pit Boss Jerky, MIKIMOS Barbecue and Catering. Let's get back to our conversation with Christian Dyer.
Like what you hear so far? Make sure you never miss an episode of Experience the Buzz by clicking the subscribe button now. This podcast is made possible by listeners like you. Thank you for your support. It means everything. Now, back to the show.
And we are back. Yes, Christian Dyer. He is a professional rugby player. He's right here from Northern California, specifically Carmichael. Went to OLA, Jesuit, on to Cal, and that's kind of where we pick up the story, where after Cal, what happens, right? He's already mentioned the fact that he's played for Team USA, tore the ACL, missed that opportunity. What happened after Cal and that experience?
Yeah, so the ACL is what changed the trajectory. I was going to do a fifth year at Cal, tore my ACL, COVID hit. So I think a lot of collegiate, sports and players are like, all right, what's happening? Are we playing next season? Do we have to forego this season? Am I going to have my eligibility for the next season? So there was just so many unknown factors. But the head coach of the USA Sevens team reached out and said, hey, if you expedite your graduation, rehab your ACL, get back into playing shape, we'll bring you down here full time. And it was a tough decision. I was loving college life. I mean, it literally was living the best life. I'm an hour and 20 minutes away from home. I could drive home to have a dinner made by my mom. She could do my laundry. I could be back in Berkeley right that night. And it was easy. Life was good. I didn't have any bills. I didn't have to work a job to sustain my lifestyle. It was a fun time in my life. But I realized, all right, if I want to go play for the national team, if I want to travel the world, play professional rugby, I got to make a pivot. And I got to get out of my comfort zone and everything that I was loving at that point, and I got to go submerge myself in the best possible environment. Wow. So I left college, moved down to San Diego, Olympic Training Center, and I was in a professional environment from sun up to sundown, Monday through Sunday. And that's what kickstarted the professional career.
Okay, and what was that like for you? Because, again, now you're going through another transition. One of the transitions is you had to make the decision, right? And it was a big one. But now you're going into an all-day thing, and it's like there's no degree. There's nothing like that. This is going to be my life, and this is going to be my foundation. What was that like?
Tough transition at first because I was used to, maybe working out in the morning and then going to class all day and then going back to practice and then going back to my house with all the boys and hanging out. And then on the weekends, we're probably partying or I had a game. And I was so accustomed to that lifestyle. It was rinse and repeat for 4 years. So the transition to a full-on professional environment where we're training from essentially 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. every single day, 2 field sessions, weight room session, film review, video analysis. It was a shock to me just because I didn't know what it was like, and you don't know what you don't know. But I think as the months went on, I started to realize, all right, this is what it takes. And we had players on that team who've already been to 2 Olympics and who have already been to 2 World Cups, and they're World Player of the Years. And I just think being around them taught me so much about what being a professional athlete's like. But when I really, really understood it is when Nate Ebner, who played 10 years in the NFL, won 3 Super Bowls with the New England Patriots, went to the Olympics for rugby. When he came back to join us prepping for the Tokyo Olympics, which got postponed to 2021, I started to mimic everything that guy was doing. Waking up 5:36 a.m., I understood how he was fueling his body, how he was hydrating, how he was approaching strength sessions, how he was approaching the field sessions. And then this guy's work ethic was just contagious. And so I just embodied everything he did and try to make it my own life and take obviously tidbits from his, but also personalize it with what works for me and what doesn't work for me. But I think just being around those people and asking questions and just trying to be a sponge. I mean, I was almost naive at sometimes, like if I saw somebody do X, I was going to do X just because I thought it would work out that way. And in hindsight, it doesn't always work out in your favor, but you got to try something that obviously the best are doing.
Well, I like how you said it though, but because you were emulating things, but you were also trying to then personalize it so it helps you. And so again, another funny thought came into my head, and it's the stigma. Okay, when I picture rugby, I picture dirty, going to the tavern, give me some pints and slamming down beers, right? So you mentioned partying. I would have to imagine, probably on the tail end of high school, probably into college, you enjoyed those experiences. But then when you became professional, did that change? Kind of take me through that mindset. Is my stigma correct?
Yeah, I think rugby in general, especially at the club level, it's go play a game, and then after you're meeting up at your local pub or bar or whatever, and you're smashing beers, which there is a time and a place for that. And I've had some great nights doing exactly that. But high school, I wasn't that much of a partier. I was always fearful of my dad and letting him down or making a mistake or doing something stupid. So I was typically the DD in high school. Now, that's not to say I never had fun or let loose. I did. But for the most part, I was pretty disciplined in that regard. College, I would pick my moments when I went out and partied. Obviously in college, there's fraternity parties that happen 4 days out of the week. I said no to 99% of them. After a big win, yes, we're going to celebrate. We're going to have some fun. Yeah. And then when you get to the next level, though, that's when you really have to be careful of what you're doing on the weekends. Mm-hmm. There was times I went 4 or 5 months without having any alcohol. And then in the off season, okay, maybe we can relax, have some beers, enjoy the time off. But I think you really just got to understand the inputs versus the outputs in your life, and it has to align with what you're going for. And so if I wanted to be professional athlete representing the USA at the highest level, but also being able to get the best out of Christian Dyer, there were some things that I had to put on the back burner. And people say they're sacrifices, but I always think they're choices. It's a choice if you want to do X or Y, right? I just can't buy into that word sacrifice, because at the end of the day, it's your choice if you want to get to where you want to go. And so those are the little choices you got to make.
I think that's well said. Well said. And so we're now in the modern day, right? The USA experience is happening for you, and then Major League Rugby. Now, was the Houston Sabercats? Is that the only team that you played for? Take me through kind of that window to where we are now in 2024.
So I joined the Sevens program in San Diego. I missed the Olympics. I really thought I was going to go. All the conversations with the coaches were in my favor of, you're going to get selected. I was told no on a Saturday night. This is like early June. And the 15s side, which is the other variation of rugby, which is the one I play now, they needed to know, am I going or not? And if I wasn't going, which was the case, I got on a flight to London the next morning at 7:30 a.m. to go play for the 15s national team.
Wow.
And that quick 24-hour period where I changed sides of rugby, that's what changed the entire trajectory of where I was going. Okay. So getting back into the 15s game, which was the predominant version at Cal, that's what I stuck with. And so represented the USA, debuted July 4th, 2021 against England. And that's when I think my stock as a player really started to rise. So I had opportunities to go play in Europe, play here in the U.S. But after that whole Olympic year of just training, I was in such a state of burnout where I didn't want to go over to London. I got an offer from a team, but I wasn't feeling my best physically and mentally. So I was like, all right, let's park up here in the U.S. for a year or two, see what happens. The former South African national team coach left South Africa to come coach this side in Houston. And he's like the Bill Belichick of rugby in this world. And that's when I was like, all right, let's go to Houston. Let's learn from this guy. Let's develop as a player and as a person. And then we'll just see what happens after that.
Wow. And so in Major League Rugby, I am curious because they've been around just for a few years, right? Yep. And so what are the crowds like that you guys draw compared to, right, on the international scene where we know they pack stadiums?
Yeah. I mean, obviously they're a lot smaller, and there's two reasons. One, market in America for rugby is smaller, but also venues are smaller. So here at Houston, we're getting sold out crowds, pretty often, week in and week out, which we'll get up to 5,000-6,000 people. In a small stadium, it's still pretty loud, but then you get to the international level and you go play in these World Cup soccer stadiums or these rugby stadiums that hold 85,000, 90,000 people at times.
So cool that you played for USA, at that point of your career. So, man, I feel like I almost just skipped over that. How dare I do that, right? It's that is such a great thing. What were some key moments within that experience that you can help share with us?
The debut was an epic roller coaster. I got into London that next morning that I just mentioned, and the coach said, hey, you haven't played 15s in 20 months, and that's because the ACL happened and then COVID happened. Mm-hmm. So I haven't been in the game for a while. I was just playing sevens. He said, we're going to rest you this week against England, but the plan is to play you the following week against Ireland. I was like, all right, I'm totally fine with that. It makes total sense. So I trained all week in a position that I've never played in my life, and this is wing, number 14. Okay. And traditionally, I always play center, which is number 13. So I'm in this new position, trying to just figure out what the heck is going on, where I need to stand, where I need to position myself. It was pretty difficult just because I've never done it before, but at the end of the day, it's still rugby. And so I just let my natural abilities carry me away. Friday, day before the game, if you're not in the playing squad, you have conditioning. And I wasn't in the playing squad, so I did the conditioning, brutal circuits, running, tackling, whatever it may be. And in the corner of my eye, the strength and conditioning coach comes running over and he goes, hey, Christian, stop. You're playing tomorrow. I said, huh? He said, yeah, Will Hooley, who's a teammate of mine, he failed his concussion test. So you're going to go in for him. And I was like, whoa. So 24 hours later, I'm suiting up, playing for the USA against England, and there was no time to think.
Oh, my gosh.
Yeah.
Wait, are we done there? I mean, okay, come on. Give me more in terms of that moment when you again, I'm visualizing a Major League Baseball pitcher throwing his first pitch, playing his first game. It's just that feeling where and getting the goosebumps, man. You played for USA, but not in this capacity. What was that like?
It was crazy. When you go play at Twickenham, which is the home of rugby in the world, iconic stadium, iconic venue. You take a bus. There's thousands of people lining the street in this, I don't know, you're driving through them, they're cheering you on, and I'm just looking around like, what is happening? I come from a small town, Sacramento, where you get a couple hundred people max to a rugby game, and then at Cal, maybe you get a couple thousand, to then going through streets where there's parades, where there's flags, both USA flags and England flags, and then I get into the stadium, and I'm looking around it, and it holds, I think, 65,000 people, and it honestly was such a shock to me that I don't have a lot of memories because it went by so fast and I had so much adrenaline and so much emotions that I try to absorb it and I try to be present, but I think the stage was still so big for me that I didn't really realize it was happening.
So it's interesting that you mentioned the number. I was wondering about the numbers because I was watching your highlights, and for most of them, you were number 14. But then I would see one here and there that was 13. So are you assigned a number or do you get to pick a number?
Your position dictates your number.
Okay.
So for everyone listening, I mean, if you're numbered 1 through 8, you're in a position that's similar to a lineman.
Okay.
If you're numbered 9 through 15, that's a skilled position. And so I typically, that's just the way rugby was, I guess, created. But I'm usually 14, which is wing, which is probably a hybrid between a receiver and a safety.
Okay, good, because that leads into, what position you play, but you described that very well for us. That's fine, because with football, the linemen, it's the opposite. They're the bigger numbers, right? So that's good. No, this is a good education piece. So Christian Dyer is our guest. We're so excited to have him on board. Again, we saw each other a couple weeks ago. His older sister, Maddie, got married, got to see the whole Dyer family. It was a great reunion because Christian went to a school called Sierra Oaks, and there's so many great families. And all these great families that I had known 20, 25 years ago were there. And maybe not that long, 15 to 20 years ago, but they were in one space, and it was such a great night and stuff. And we have to remind you that, Christian, you're 26, right?
I'm 26.
Right. Same age as my son, Max. So I know you guys are friends. And Max did want me to tell you to give a shout out and say hello.
What's up, Max?
So as we transition, so that takes care of the rugby career. The next piece is that this guy has a podcast. It's called The Chase. And I have to tell you, Christian, I listened to 2 episodes just to kind of get a feel. And you did a smart thing. You did your story on top. That was an interview by someone else, but it helped kind of tell your story. And it really kind of gave me some good insight. But then I'm like, well, wait, I want to hear what he's like as a host. And bam, I was like, man, this is impressive. So I do want to say to you personally, great job. You've done a great job with this podcast. Talk to me about this part of what you do, because yes, the world is rugby, but what I love and appreciate about you is that you figured out as an entrepreneur how to do some different things and facilitate that.
Yeah. Okay. So it all came back to the ACL. When I tore it, rugby was my identity. I told you how I felt off the field directly translated to how I was performing on the field. When rugby was taken out of my life, at that point it was almost 18 to 20 months. I realized, all right, I got to find some other things in my life that actually fulfill me, that give me energy and that I have an interest in. And that was the first moment and experience where I realized sport is going to be temporary. It's not going to be with me forever. And if another injury like this occurs in my life, that could be the last one, and I could be moving on. So it's like, all right, what other things in life do I love? I love sports. I love people. I love learning about how our body moves and how we can optimize our performance both on and off the field. And I love creating content, love sharing stories. I was like, all right, I know that now. I also know that if I looked in my contact list on my phone, I could pull out guys in the NFL, NBA, Olympians, entrepreneurs, head of businesses, whatever it may be. I was like, okay. And I looked back on my early days. I was on YouTube, day in the life of Christian McCaffrey. What does Tom Brady eat? How does LeBron James work out? So I was always fascinated about how the legends of any sport live their life. And it got to a point I ran out of all the videos. I've seen them 5 times each. So with everything I just said, I was like, all right, it's time that I start doing it and creating these stories and this content and giving it back to the next generation of athletes and just everyday human beings trying to chase a dream. That's why it's called The Chase. And now it's been the coolest part of my life, having conversations with people that I look up to, giving back value and experiences and really the realities of what chasing a dream's like, and hearing it from people who have done it. So, I mean, you've got UFC Hall of Famer Uriah Faber, Sacramento boy. You got Blaine Scully, was captain of USA Rugby. You got Nate Ebner, 3-time, Super Bowl champ. Or
the guy you looked up to, right? That you emulated yourself. Yeah.
Nathan Adrian, who has 7 medals in the Olympics. It's just been such a privilege to have these conversations. And then it goes another step forward. Okay, the network's building. I'm starting to work with brands. I'm starting to understand being an entrepreneur and making money outside of rugby and creating my own personal brand. And now it's going to be, we're going to create a product. We're going to create a coaching system, and then I'm going to create training programs for youth athletes. And so all of this has happened just because I finally realized that sport was temporary. My identity is not rooted in what I do for a living. And now it's, like I said, it's all a lifestyle.
Yeah, and talk more about kind of the podcast. Like, is that how you drummed it up in your head? Is that this is what I want to do? I want to bring on these guests. Or as you started, did it change a little bit? Because I've noticed, like, even with doing Experience the Buzz, some things change as you go along because you're always trying to improve yourself. Yeah. Did you have that happen to you as well?
Yeah, the original plan was just to have athletes on. Mm-hmm. And for the first, I want to say 15 episodes, that was it. It was incredible. But as I got older, as I started to learn more things about myself and different interests that I have in this world, I was like, hey, maybe I want to have on some nutrition experts or some sleep doctors or some entrepreneurs and start tapping into those worlds, because those are all things that I love. So it has evolved to, I guess, a broader spectrum of guests. And now we're building a 10-episode health series where I bring on different doctors, nutritionists, sleep experts, strength and conditioning coaches, because I want to make health simple in a world that you have this diet and this person telling you what to do and this training program is the best one. It's like, come on now. We all have a life outside of that. Some people work 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. Let me give them the 3 or 4 things that they actually should focus on.
Wow. Outside of playing for Team USA, this is what's given me goosebumps, because this is why I started this podcast. Because even though I was a teacher for 27 years, and that was a 9 to 5, September through June, to me, the entrepreneur spirit is such a great one to tap into. Number one, because you have control of what it is that you want to put out into the universe. The second piece is that you have taken something, and yes, rugby is your world, but now you've made it into this rugby universe that is now featuring the brand of what Christian Dyer is about, and you've been able to go down these other roads. And that's what fascinated me. And as I was listening to the podcast, I'm just sitting there clapping, Christian. I was like, way to go. I mean,
Thank you, brother.
And listen, give your credit as a host too, because I will say I listen to a lot of podcasts, and one turnoff can be for me is that host doesn't have that oomph, I guess is the best word to say it. You do it very well, and I think it just speaks to your confidence that you have. And are there some things that you've learned along the way as a podcaster?
Yeah, I think do your research.
Yep.
I mean, as you know.
Yep.
And then I think at the end of the day, you just want to have a conversation. I never wanted it to feel like an interview.
You hit it.
That's it. And obviously, you're in front of people every single day. You have your own business. You're a school teacher. You're a DJ. So you understand people and you know how to read people. And so that's why you're such an excellent podcast host yourself. But I don't think it's for everyone.
I agree.
And that's not right or wrong. It's just some people have it and some people don't. But I'm still evolving how I'm doing it every single day. And I want to say every episode I do is better than the last one. Yep. And that's just really the goal, is to continue improving.
And Christian, one thing that hit me in your story, the one I listened to up top, you talked about kind of a foundation, and you talked about 5 things in your life that are kind of the cornerstones of who you are. And again, this was another moment for me. Folks, you have to understand, when I see people like Christian, and he's only 26 years of age, okay, being able to do great things. And yeah, he's a rugby player. He's a well-established rugby player. But it's all this other stuff that he's been able to establish that really has made me proud, like just as a friend. Can you talk about those 5 cornerstones? Because I was like, it just again, gave me the goosebumps.
Yeah, thanks for mentioning that. I love that. It's my values, and it's how I live my life. And so at the top of the values is spending quality time with family and friends. The next one, living a healthy lifestyle, doing hard things, inspiring another person to chase their dream. And the 5th, I don't know which one I said on the 5th, because I have like 6 that I really
there were some subcategories.
Yeah, but I know those are the 4 that I live by every single day. And the reason it's so big in my life is I think a lot of people go through life trying to fulfill other people's values and trying to get other people closer to their goals rather than their personal goals. And so if I can wake up every single day knowing my values and trying my best to fill each value cup just a tiny bit, I think I can go to sleep every night proud of myself, fulfilled, with energy, and just content. I think happiness is a word that people try to chase and people try to have in their life, and it comes and it goes. But I'm chasing contentment. Like, I'm happy with where I'm at today. I'm content with what I'm doing in this world. And those whole values that I just mentioned allow me to wake up every single day. I want to look in the mirror, proud of who I am, the opportunity to make somebody else better, the opportunity to maybe lighten somebody's day, and just be something good in this world. And it doesn't matter what you do in your career, because at the end of the day, we're all going to go home. We're going to get on our couch. We're going to be the same human being. Like, regardless of what's in your bank account, those are the things that I really focus on.
Family foundation, I know, is big for you as well. You've mentioned it already. What are your biggest takeaways from mom and dad and what they were able to give you?
Yeah, that I can attribute who I am today wholeheartedly to mom and dad. The empathy, the people skills, hosting people, hosting families over, hosting friends, or creating these environments of just welcomeness all comes from mom. She's the most nurturing person that I've ever met in my life. The structure, the discipline, the work ethic, the mental toughness, that comes from pops, and something that I've always strived to be like. My dad he builds homes, as you know, and every single home he builds, he puts the customer first, and he walks into that job site trying to make them feel comfortable and confident in what they're doing and happy. And I try to emulate that, because any door my dad walks into, he brightens it, and he can put a smile on anybody's face, and he makes people feel that they have a part in this world. And so those are kind of the things that I've always tried to strive for, and I really, really value my parents for giving me that experience. And then I got brother and sister. Yep. Sister is superwoman. She literally does it all. She's going to be CEO of some Fortune 50 company. So there's part of her that I've taken away, even though we're drastically different. But then my brother is the chillest human being ever. I mean, think of a Cal Poly frat surfer. That's Jack.
That's Jack.
He's got some savviness to him. He's got this vibe, but he's a people's person. I mean, he lives life the way it should be, because he just appreciates the little things. And he kind of lives life on his own terms. He's not trying to fit this cookie cutter mold that I think a lot of people are trying to do. You got to go to college, get this degree, go work for this business, and then chase the next promotion. Like, he just lives life on his terms. So everybody in my family has taught me a lot about life, and I'm just fortunate to have those 4 people in my circle.
Amen to that. And I love the fact that you're also wanting to give back so early in your life. Talk about that piece, because it's important, but a lot of people don't get that until later on in life.
Yeah. When I was a kid, the U.S., it all started here. The USA team, they came to Jesuit to train. And I missed football practice a couple times. I told the coach I was busy with something just to watch them train. But after their practice, a few of them would come over to me, and I was just in awe. Like, they were supermen to me, and I was like, I just want to be like that. And when I'm older one day, I want to be able to come back to my high school and teach the young kids. And I think that's really what opened my eyes to it and given me that foundation of just trying to be a servant for other people in this world. But now I'm in such a cool position where I get DMs from kids all over the world. Hey, can you teach me about this? Can you share with me this about your life, or whatever it is? And it's a pretty humbling and it's a really cool feeling having guys that you've never met in this world reaching out to you because they look up to you. And I just think everything in life shouldn't be about me. It should be about what I can do for other people. And so when I'm playing, yeah, I want to win, but there's going to be a kid in that stand who wants to be like me one day. And so I need to put out my best performance, whether I'm having a great game or not. I want to show that I'm energetic. I'm loving this game. I'm passionate about it, because you never know the life that you can change outside of your own.
Yeah, and Christian, you mentioned the window too, the window of opportunity to be able to play this game that you love so much. And listen, barring no injuries, which we don't want that, right?
Yeah.
What is the window for a rugby player?
I'd say the average retirement age is around 30.
Okay.
It depends on the position. It also depends on which league you're playing in, because some pay big money, and you could probably extend your career a little more because the financial incentive is worth it. I'd say for me, if I were to take a guess on when I'd hang up the boots, it's after that 2027 Rugby World Cup. We missed it last year, the United States, and that was pretty gutting, just to be so close to going to the World Cup, but missing out on it by point differential. And so, yeah, it was tough. But a dream of mine has been to go to a World Cup and represent the USA at the highest level possible, and that's in 3 years' time. And if I get there and when I get there, we'll see where my head's at. But there's so many other things in this life that I'm loving. And I think genuinely, if you were to take rugby out of my life today, I'm good. I'm happy.
Love that. So the last piece of the bucket list, right?
Yeah.
World Cup.
That'd be cherry on top.
Yeah. What's the movie? The great movie about World Cup?
Invictus?
Yes.
Yeah. Matt Damon.
Yes. So good. So good. So as we close up shop, I'm sure people have gone through this conversation, hopefully have been very inspired. What are the ways that people can find you?
Sure. So you can follow my podcast, The Chase, Apple Podcasts or Spotify. Instagram is at Christian J. Dyer. I put everything in my life on there, my lifestyle, training, nutrition, how I'm recovering, what I'm doing off the field on there. I'm a pretty open book, and we'll start dabbling more back into YouTube when I have some more time, doing some vlogs and day in the lives and how I'm approaching everything. But those are probably the two best ways to reach me is through the podcast or Instagram.
Beautiful. And you know what? I never like to shortchange a conversation. And I mentioned it earlier, and we're going to finish with it. We have to talk about the marathon.
Yeah.
That was impressive, my friend. And this was due to the injury, right?
Yeah, I tore a ligament in my wrist September 16th of last year. So I knew I was going to be out of rugby for 3 or 4 months.
Okay.
And I need something in my life that I'm really going for. And if I knew rugby was out of it, you can only work out an hour or so a day. So I was like, all right, what's something that I haven't done? Marathon. And I have 20 or 30 friends of mine who run them religiously, 5, 6, 7, sometimes 12 times a year.
Wow.
And I've always been inspired by them. And I was living in Dallas at that time with my buddy Dominic Trolio. And the Dallas running community is just fantastic. It's so big, and I have so many friends that are into that sort of stuff. So I was like, all right, let's get out of my comfort zone. Let's train, which I trained for 7 weeks, 7.5 weeks for it, when in reality I probably should have trained for 20 weeks for it. I was rugby training in the morning, training with NFL free agents, doing all the speed, agility, weight room sessions in the morning, and then in the evenings I would go on these longer runs. It was hard. That's all I'm going to say. But it was the most incredible experience where I was running 26.2 miles, and along the run, I met so many cool people. I ran 2 miles with a guy who was pushing his daughter with cerebral palsy. We talked the entire time. That right there gave me an instant boost of energy, and also this perspective of, okay, anything bad in my life, it's not that bad.
Yeah.
It was a cool moment. And then just to look back on the training and all the memories I made, and it was one of the hardest things I've ever done in my life, but it was probably one of the most special moments I've had. Now, it's not the smartest thing to do, getting ready for another rugby season, because your body's in shambles. I lost some top end speed, but nonetheless, screw it. It was so cool.
You went for it. And you know what was most impressive to me is your average mile was like 8:39. I'm like, holy cow.
I pushed it, Steve.
Yes, well done. And it's great because, announcing the California International Marathon, I think I've done it for 7 or 8 years. The big thing I always talk about is that, like, in my mind, like, I'm there announcing thousands of names for hours, right?
Yeah.
And I kind of look at it as a marathon as well. Like, I'm going to try to say every single name because I know how special it is for those that cross the finish line. The other piece for me that's fascinating is in my head, I'm going, I wonder what your story is and what your story is and what your story is. And I think that's the best part that I found with the running community that just makes it a little bit different. You talk about how rugby is special. I think that's where it makes the running community special.
The running community is so cool because there's no barrier to entry. Anybody can do it, and you can do it anywhere. Yep. In the people that start running a marathon, or maybe they run a half marathon, what's pretty cool about it is your whole lifestyle starts to change because you're starting to think about things a little differently. Mm-hmm. Maybe I got to go to bed a little earlier on Friday nights and Saturday nights. Maybe I probably shouldn't have that second glass of wine. Maybe I should think about eating a clean, quality meal rather than takeout or whatever it may be. And so your whole life starts to change, and I think it's for the better. Some people may not like it. That's just my perspective. But then you get to join other people who are doing hard things, and you create this bond, and you then start pushing past these limits that you put in your head where once 1 mile was hard, but then you run your first 3 mile run, and you're like, 1 mile is so easy. So your perception of what's hard in your life starts to change.
I love that. I love that. So, Christian, finish me off with pearls of wisdom. Like any pearls of wisdom that you'd like to share with the audience. We have touched on so much. I believe we've covered it all. I feel pretty good about it as a host. Hopefully you do as a guest. But as we finish, we always like to finish with a bang.
With a bang. A quote that I always love is, whether you think you can or you think you can't, you're right. And it just comes back to the power of self-belief. And I really think a lot of people in this world have dreams, have aspirations. Maybe they want to make a career change because they're not happy with what they're doing. but they're creating this false sense of reality in their head that if they do make that decision, it's not going to work out. But you never know unless you at least go for it. And so for me, I'm saying yes to a lot more than I'm saying no to lately. It's opening up doors. It's also allowing me to fail. And the more I fail, the more I learn more about myself, and the more I learn how not to fail.
Christian, I can't say it enough. I mean,
Brother.
Way to go with the rugby, way to go with the podcast. But I think the most important for me is who you are, man. You've done a good job.
I appreciate that more than you know.
Oh, man. Good stuff. Well, there you have it, folks. It's Christian Dyer. So glad he could come on. We could have this conversation. Man, just good stuff. That's going to do it. I'll be back with a final word.
Like what you hear so far? Make sure you never miss an episode of Experience the Buzz by clicking the subscribe button now. This podcast is made possible by listeners like you. Thank you for your support. It means everything. Now, back to the show.
Well, I really hope you enjoyed that conversation with Christian Dyer here on Experience the Buzz. I want you to now check out my episode with Hannah Baker. She is a wedding coordinator with Sage Weddings and Events based in Idaho, but still working out of California. And that's on the brand new podcast. That's right. Let's Talk Weddings. It's only episode number 3. We have just launched as of a few weeks ago. And I want to invite you to be a part of the fun and the experience right here on Let's Talk Weddings and Experience the Buzz.
Thank you for joining Steve this week on Experience the Buzz. Steve would love to hear from you. Leave a review or contact Steve directly with any questions at scbuzzard@gmail.com. To see the other adventures of Steve Buzzard, be sure to visit buzzardball.com.